Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode in the Get Healthy Makeover series. I'm Linda Curry, and I'm really glad you are here today. So we are going to talk about stress eating. This is so common with most people. And unless we are really grounded and we don't have a lot of stress in our lives, it can be very challenging as we find ourselves going to the kitchen every time that we're stressed out at work, or maybe we're procrastinating on something that we know we should do and we turn to food, or maybe we lack love in our lives. We're not feeling loved and valued, and so we turn to food to try to get that comfort. So today we're going to talk about two different strategies to combat this stress eating. And the first strategy is what I like to refer to as food rules. Now, it sounds a little harsh to create rules in our life, but we're going to create one or maybe two food rules that are specific to your challenge areas. So, the first thing you're going to do today is journal in your notebook, jot down all the different challenge areas that you find with eating. So maybe it's meal planning that is not your strong suit. Maybe you're just rushed, you're so hungry for dinner and you just grab a bunch of unhealthy processed foods. Or maybe you are tempted by the fast foods on the way home from work. Or maybe you like to snack in the evenings before bed. Identify these areas that you think are not serving you and you want to change. So I'm going to give you an example. When I was in the corporate world, I discovered the power of creating a food rule. Every Friday, it seemed that somebody would bring in donuts into the office area. And it just smelled so delicious. I just had to struggle with my willpower week after week to try to resist these donuts. So I established a food rule that donuts is not food for me. It just is not something that I will eat ever, period. Okay? It sounds kind of harsh, but it's just something that I believe donuts are just a very unhealthy food and it's not something I really need to be enjoying. Now, so when there's not a choice to make, I already established this rule. So when the donuts come in, there's really no choice to eat or to not eat the donut. So willpower doesn't have to come into play. That's the nice thing and why these food rules are so effective. Now, I could have easily have gone to the vending machines and gotten something equally unhealthy as the donut, but it didn't seem to happen. It just got easier and easier to just ignore the donuts and the smell that was in the office area. So that's an example of the power of these food rules. Later, I would find out I was gluten intolerant, and those donuts really weren't serving me on many levels. Um, but in any case, that was probably 20 years ago that I had established that rule. And since then, I have had one donut. So it's not a challenge area for me anymore. So it doesn't have to be a food rule, but it's still a food that I tend to avoid. Maybe for you, a food rule is no eating past 7 p.m. And maybe that will just shift things for you. And once you get out of the habit of eating in the evenings, it's so much easier. When you get used to having a snack, it becomes habit and you just want it every single night. But let me assure you that it gets easier if you can just avoid it for a few days. It gets a lot easier. Maybe for you, a food rule is no vending machines at work or no fast food restaurants on the way home from work. Um, and so maybe you have to establish some healthy actions like meal prepping or having some healthy snacks, some trail mix at your desk at work, for example. So you want to establish these food rules, but then come up with some actions so that you can manage it. You don't want to go hungry, certainly. And we all get stressed. And sometimes allowing some food to nourish us can be comforting. And so a healthier option is certainly going to be better. I do prefer allowing rather than depriving if we really need it. Okay, moving on. Next, we are going to talk about mindfulness techniques. And so, a lot of times, our stress eating is very predictable. So, maybe for you, it's a 3 o'clock chocolate craving, or a potato chips, you need something salty. In any case, there's usually a time frame where this typically happens. So I'm going to encourage you to implement a mindfulness practice before this stress eating period. So if it's 3 o'clock, then maybe at 2 o'clock or 2:30, you implement some journaling or going out in the garden or taking a walk around the neighborhood, just being very mindful and present with nature around you. This is very grounding and it takes us out of this left brain, task oriented mindset and brings us back down to earth. And a lot of times, those stress eating tendencies tend to disappear when we do this. I have a practice that I'm particularly fond of, and I call it the 4 Minute Miracle Practice. I published a book series around this practice, and it is mirror work. So it's establishing a deeper connection with yourself by looking yourself in the mirror and oftentimes talking to yourself and just offering reassurance that everything's okay and you're enough. And um, just making sure that you are comforting this child within and accepting her and accepting the fears that she has. It's just a very comforting practice. But anyway, it only takes 4 minutes, and you could even do it for 2 minutes. But when I started to implement this practice, I found that my stress eating disappeared, and it wasn't my goal, but it's what happened. I was really just looking for um, more acceptance with myself and a deeper connection with self. But it's amazing what mindfulness practices can bring you. So for stress eating, that's another option. You could also pull out a coloring book and do some drawing. You don't have to be great at art to move into that right brain, expressive, creative part of yourself that brings you back down to earth into a centered space where all of this stress kind of just floats away. You may like to do visioning work or affirmations. You might want to try a guided meditation. Something that's super easy is just closing your eyes and focusing on your breath for 2 minutes. Or what I like also is bending over, touching your toes, and doing some deep belly breathing that way. There's something really magical about it, that really can ground you and reset you. And perhaps you still want to go to the kitchen and get a snack, but at that point, you're probably going to choose a healthier option. Maybe it's even just a cup of herbal tea that is going to start to nourish your soul. So for this week, I would like for you to journal some options for you. So you have different options based on the day and the time that you can start implementing some of these mindfulness practices. See what resonates with you, see what works. You may want to do this before the 3 o'clock chocolate craving, or you may create a rule that says, when I have a craving and I'm going to go to the kitchen to get something to eat, first I have to do a mindfulness practice. And you may have some options of what that looks like. So that is another way to use these food rules. So with that, I wish you luck with implementing some food rules and some mindfulness practices as a strategy to cut down on stress eating. And I hope that you will return, and I'll see you next week for another episode of the Get Healthy Makeover series. Take care.